The Grenlec Debates, powering bright ideas.
You're watching the 11th season of the Grenlec Debates. Please bear in mind that matches, topics, and positions are randomly selected by schools. The theme for the semifinals is climate change. And the motion is, be it resolved that human activity is causing climate change. The proposition, the Anglican High. The opposition, Bishop's College. Please welcome the first speaker for the proposition.
There comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground. Wangari Maathai. Today, we are called upon to reach that moral ground by honestly acknowledging that human activity is causing climate change. Such is an imperative if we are to mount an effective response to same. Our survival depends on it. Good morning, all. We strongly affirm the mood be it resolved that human activity is causing climate change. Human activity is defined by Webster Dictionary as something that people do or cause to happen. Cambridge Dictionary defines causing as to give rise to. The English Oxford Dictionary defines climate change as a change in global or regional climate patterns, in particular, a change apparent from the mid to late 20th century onwards and attributed largely to increased levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide produced by the use of fossil fuels. I will show by how our very nature we engage in activities which are causing climate change. And my second speaker will provide well-established evidence in support of same. Judges, climate change is indeed a complex phenomenon. And yes, we accept the fact there are several factors which contribute to this phenomenon. However, our task is to provide clear and valid evidence that human activity is causing climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in its fifth assessment report, posits that there is indisputable evidence that human activity is causing changes on the climate system. In fact, they state that with respect to the radiative forcing, the effect of natural factors stands at a meager 0.05 watts per square meter, as opposed to human activity, which measures an alarming 2.83 watts per square meter. And while we recognize that pre-industrial revolution, the climate has been changing in accordance with natural factors, the dramatic and rapid increase in climate change cannot in any way be attributed solely to nature because, according to IPCC, natural changes evolve over long periods of time, shifting from ice age to interglacial and back again. Judges, our quest to attain wealth and comfort have overshadowed the importance of maintaining balance with the environment and have resulted in unprecedented and aggressive responses from nature. Let us examine food production and necessary human activity. The United Nations assesses that food production is the second leading driver of greenhouse gas emissions, second only to energy production. Our activities, including producing food, transporting it, and storing food waste in landfills, produce indiscriminate levels of greenhouse gas emissions, which engenders climate change. This is validated by the Johns Hopkins Center, which states that livestock production alone accounts for an estimated 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Judges, another area of assault on our vulnerable ecosystem is humanity's wanton practices in relation to deforestation to make way for human habitation and mineral extraction. Through burning and the use of heavy machinery, large forested areas are cleared of trees and layers upon layers of overburdened soil to get to the ore. Trees that are vital in the trapping of carbon dioxide are destroyed. Judges, the Journal of Environmental Science explains that these actions add to the release of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. Further, harmful chemicals get into waterways and places the environment under further stress. And yet, we still question the role of human activity in causing climate change. And how about the manufacturing industry in causing climate change? Judges, the Industrial Revolution, which began in Britain in the 18th century and expanded globally, was powered by coal. The transition from agrarian societies to large cities, which became manufacturing hubs, saw the construction of large industrial plants driven by coal, as well as railway expansions and large ocean liners, all powered by steam generated by coal combustion. Opponents, CO2 is the main byproduct of coal combustion, and the National Geographic states nearly 4 grams of CO2 are produced for every gram of coal burnt. Depending on its type, it can produce between 60 to 80% carbon. Judges, this not only gives rise to high levels of pollution, but it undoubtedly aids global warming due to its emission of heat-trapping gases. Judges, the evidence is clear. Human activity is indeed causing climate change.
The first speaker for the opposition.
Climate change is a reality. It has changed in past, is changing in present, and will change in future. It would be unenlightened of us to not point out that humans have their part to play in climate change. Worthy opponents, what we propose is that humans are not causing climate change, but has influenced and accelerated the process of climate change, which is a natural phenomenon. As first speaker, I will outline how climate change is a natural process. Our second speaker will establish how countries with little carbon emission and without inhabitants experience climate change. Honorable judges, opponents, audience, three key terms are at the crux of our stance. Firstly, climate change in accordance to the Australian Academy of Science is, and I quote, a change in the statistical properties of the climate system that persists for several decades or longer, usually at least 30 years. These statistical properties include averages, variability, and extremes, end of quote. According to Oxford Dictionary, cause is a person or thing that gives rise to an action, phenomenon, or condition. And influence from the former source is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself, end of quote. Worthy opponents, is climate change new? While man has been a great influencer on climate change, it is not fair to say that man is the cause of climate change. According to an article from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, Summary for Policymakers 2007, the climate has changed constantly over millennia due to natural processes, evident through the cooling and warming experience with ice ages and interglacial periods, unquote. Additionally, Davis and Bowell in 2001 and Court of 2001 argued that both past and present trends suggest that the future climate will be naturally continuing warmth, followed by descent into colder, perhaps glacial conditions. There are many natural precursors of climate change. They are as follows: volcanoes, greenhouse gases, GHG, plate tectonics, variation in solar radiation, El Niño Southern Oscillation. These precursors are not created by man, but are natural phenomena. While it will be time-consuming to outline how all these precursors affect climate change, I will take the time to expound on one case. Do you consider volcanoes, the ocean, and natural gases like carbon dioxide man-made? In an article written by Miller et al., abrupt onset of the Little Ice Age triggered by volcanism as sustained by sea ice ocean feedbacks, Geophysical Research Letters 39, 2012, argued that large volcanic eruptions in the late 13th century might have initiated the abrupt onset of the Little Ice Age, which was then sustained for 6 centuries by so-called feedback loops between the oceans, sea ice, and the atmosphere. The climate system on Earth is sensitive to change and different parts of the system. Solar radiation, sea ice, cloud cover, wind, and ocean currents are interconnected. When a series of strong eruptions at the beginning of the Little Ice Age cooled the global climate, sea ice and therefore the albedo effect increased. The Earth absorbed less solar radiation and average global temperature began a long and sustained decline. In addition, an article by Alan Robock, 2003, Climatic Impact on Volcanic Emissions stated, and I quote, volcanic eruptions can inject into the stratosphere tens of teragrams of chemically and microphysically active gases and solid aerosol particles, which affects the Earth's radioactive balance and climate, and disturb the stratospheric chemical equilibrium. The resulting disturbance to the Earth's radiation balance affects surface temperature through direct radioactive effects as well as through indirect effects on the atmospheric circulation, unquote. We build scientific theories to organize and manipulate the world, to reduce phenomena into manageable units. Paul Kalanithi. Honorable judges, opponents, this quote is absolutely spot on, because what science has done is clearly passing the buck to say that humans are the cause. But we are resolute in our defense that we are merely just actors, influencers on a stage of nature far bigger than us. I thank you.
The second speaker for the proposition.
We dug graves today in Dominica. We buried loved ones yesterday. We are shouldering the consequences of the actions of others, actions that endanger our very existence, and all for the enrichment of a few elsewhere. These were the pained words of Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit as he addressed the United Nations 2017 General Assembly following the ravaging impact of Hurricane Maria. Esteemed judges, embedded in this quotation is a clear indictment of humanity's culpability in causing climate change. This claim is validated by the National Center for Atmospheric Research, who, based on a study in response to Dominica's tragedy, explains that rising temperatures and increased precipitation caused by human-induced climate change were responsible for strengthening Hurricane Maria. The study strongly concluded that in the case of Hurricane Maria, the emission of greenhouse gases from human activity increased the heat content of the ocean. This increased heat fueled the hurricane, thus sustaining and intensifying it. Opponents, there it is, a clear link between human activities and its injudicious nature in causing climate change, supported by empirical evidence. Must we be so naive as to say otherwise? Good morning, all. I wish to refute my opponent's definition and further reinforce our own. Judges, human activity as a causative factor of climate change is well established throughout the world. Here in Grenada, mangroves bear high importance to the environment. They act as effective buffers as they aid in the breaking of the energy of waves and storms and helps in the removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. In fact, my opponents, mangroves actually sequester 6 times as much carbon dioxide as regular trees, and so significantly slows down global warming. Judges, however, the Grenada Fund for Conservation indicates that a wide range of human activities right here in Grenada constitute a direct threat to mangroves, which in turn causes climate change. These include littering and dumping in swamps, overfishing, over-sedimentation from improper farming practices, and over-harvesting for construction, charcoal, and fires. Mrs. Aria St. Louis, Senior Environment Officer at the Ministry of Climate Resilience, concurs. She states that as a result of human activities, there has been a concomitant rise in sea levels, thus leading to increased erosion and flooding as experienced recently. Opponents, pray tell, if human activity is not causing climate change, why then would 192 countries be signatories to the Kyoto Agreement, which requires them to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Then why is it that the Paris Agreement, as part of its global response to climate change, mandates nations to commit themselves to control emissions through nationally determined contributions? Tell me, opponents, if human activity is not causing climate change, why are there concerted efforts by multiple organizations and individuals to engage in the Green Initiative? Opponents, clearly these are human responses to human-made problems. We would not have so acted if we didn't recognize our responsibility in causing climate change. We would not have so acted if there wasn't evidence that validates that fact. And judges, these evidence bears high reliability. Among others, it includes the measurement and chemical analysis of atmospheric carbon dioxide, as well as the careful monitoring of climatic conditions. These are subjected to large-scale scientific and technical tests to a certain soundness and accuracy. Judges, when it comes to climate change, though not the sole cause, human activity sparks culpability. Thank you.
The second speaker for the opposition.
It is not uncommon to hear scientists say that Earth has been experiencing climate change. However, to say that the 19th century brought about this change reduces this phenomenon to a small part of Earth's history, human history, which downplays Earth's 4.5 billion year history. Climate change has been occurring since time immemorial. It is an intricate system that responds to numerous influences. A little stimulus, as a 0.1% increase in CO2 emission, might drive a great change. Evidence of this can be observed in West Antarctica's peninsula, which according to Antarctica and Southern Ocean Coalition, ASOC, is one of the fastest warming areas on Earth. In a news article, Is Antarctica Melting by NASA Global Climate Change, Vital Signs of the Planet 2010, it was reported that a 12,000-year-old ice shelf, along with 9 others along the peninsula, have disintegrated since the 1970s. Amazingly, not much is going on in East Antarctica. NASA reported that during the past 25 years, its ice sheets have remained relatively balanced. Judges, the events of nature can leave us dumbfounded. The ASOC disclosed that some areas of Antarctica are actually experiencing increases in sea ice content. This surprise, according to the National Geographic 2018 article, came when a camera showed that seawater is actually freezing instead of melting onto the base of Ross ice shelf off the coastline of West Antarctica. Worthy opponents, is humanity causing climate change in Antarctica where they do not even indefinitely live? Spence et al. In the article titled Localized Rapid Warming of the West Antarctic Subsurface Waters by Remote Winds 2017 explained that there are physical mechanisms responsible for this warming. It involves localized changes in coastal winds, drops in sea level, and barotropic waves of East Antarctica which are having a substantial subsurface warming in the West. Opponents. Humans have not caused these changes. The system is too complex for human activity in the inhabited world to affect Antarctica's climate. The emission of GHGs by human activity is only influencing the action of climate factors on nature through the greenhouse effect. Comparably, climate change is wreaking havoc in many small island developing states whose contribution to GHG emission is almost microscopic on the global scale. According to the World Bank in 2014, some of the low emission per capita are as follows. Fiji, 1.35 metric tons. Solomon Islands, 0.35 metric tons. And Uganda, 0.13 metric tons. The Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of the Solomon Islands government shared that rising sea levels are currently being experienced in some areas, resulting in increased coastal erosion. Similarly, in Fiji, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change reported in 2017 that flooding in low-lying areas resulted in a village having to relocate in 2012 to higher ground due to sea level rise. Uganda, with by far the lowest CO2 emission, has been experiencing a rise in temperature in the Karamoja region over the last 35 years, which threatens its food security, according to a report by the World Food Programme 2017. Esteemed judges, these are not human-caused activities. These are manifestations of how Earth is responding to changes in its atmosphere in the form of natural events, which man has no part of whatsoever. As short as man's history has been on this Earth, so short is his influence on a phenomenon that has existed before our species was created to inhabit the Earth.
The opposition cross-examiner.
Well, the opponent, will climate change as a phenomenon cease to exist if human activities change?
No, my opponent.
Why is that?
Because there are other factors, which we clearly indicated in our first speaker's speech.
Are they natural factors?
Yes, there are.
So we are saying that the natural factors that actually cause climate change and humans just merely influence it. Yes?
If you actually look at the mood carefully, or look at the two definitions carefully, you would see that they exert the same idea.
Influence and cause are two different things. What the
But
opponent?
they exert the same idea.
No, what the opponent?
Yes, they do.
Let me move on, please.
Okay.
What are the indicators that tell us climate is changing?
Melting glaciers, carbon in the air, the Antarctica, the ice is melting, the seas becoming warmer, etc., etc.
Thank you. These are natural events. We see them because of natural evidence, because of natural causes, which you clearly
With
stated.
human activity.
Being the influence. Thank you.
No,
yes.
being the cause. Causing.
What are the terms climate change? How are the terms climate change and global warming different?
Because global warming, it's about warming. Global warming is only specified to warming, whereas climate change, it could be cooling, warming.
But yet, in your stance, you're only focusing on the warming effect.
We didn't say we are just focusing on warming. We never stated that in any of our
That is what was stated.
No, nope, my opponent.
Tell me the occurrence you stated that you talk about global cooling.
Global what?
Cooling, or just cooling.
We didn't specify to global cooling nor
Why is that?
global warming.
Climate
Because
change.
it's general. We were not specifying on one thing.
But you clearly
Climate
stated.
change is
all right,
a
thank you for the
broad-
opponent.
Okay.
Climate change is different from global warming.
Yes, it is.
Climate change has to be viewed as a whole. Global warming or warming and cooling. So if you're only talking about the warming effect, where is the cooling
We
effect?
we were not talking about we are not specifying to one
Exactly.
thing only. Exactly.
So why aren't you talking about the cooling?
We don't have to talk about, we
It
generalize
has to be
it.
viewed as a whole.
We generalize it.
It
We're
talks
not
about
just
warming
focused on
and
one.
cooling.
We're not just focused on one. We generalize
All right,
it.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Does global warming mean it is warming everywhere?
My opponent, can you please stick to the parameters of this debate? It's climate change, not global warming.
But climate change involves global warming. As I clearly stated, it needs to be viewed as a whole. It has two factors, warming and cooling.
All right, can you repeat your question?
Does global warming mean it is warming everywhere?
I guess so, because warming is part of the word global warming.
That shows that you have not done enough research.
My
to say you
opponent
guess so.
Again, climate change is a broader topic, not global
Which
warming.
deals cooling
global
and
warming,
warming.
as you stated, is one part of. It's not the global warming. Is not
Exactly.
the whole.
So why aren't you talking about the cooling?
We don't specify to one again. Why do I still have to repeat myself?
The proposition cross-examiner.
Opponent, man controls the operations of the automobile industry. If human activity is not causing climate change, then why is it that there are regulations governing the emission standards for vehicles?
Because they realize that the human influence is so high that it is driving climate change into a new level.
So you're agreeing with our
But there are other factors that contribute to climate change.
We
Examples.
agreed
Please
to that.
let me answer my question.
I'm rebutting
Solar
your
fluctuations,
question because what you're saying is just the
Well, the
same
opponent,
thing
can
as
you
what
please
I'm
give me
saying.
a chance to answer my question?
All right, answer.
There are other factors that contribute to climate change. Examples: solar fluctuations, volcanic eruptions, sun variations, orbital
My
variations.
opponent, but is that we did not dispute the fact that there are other factors, but we are saying
But you
that
did not
human
mention it
activity-
in your speech.
Yes, we did. That was the first thing we mentioned in
a
our
matter of
first
fact, your second
speaker
speaker said that humans cause climate change.
is causing. There's a difference between cause and causing.
She also said that humans cause
Our first
hurricanes.
speaker indicated the first thing she said was that we are not disputing the fact that there are other factors contributing to climate change. Next question. Opponents, are you aware that armed forces from around the world were responsible for the emission of 2/3 of chlorofluorocarbons, and that these were banned in the 1987 Montreal Protocol for causing damage to the ozone layer?
I'm fully aware of that. This was so because they realized the influence was so high, as I said before. And even though the ozone is depleted, it replenishes itself over a period of
My
time.
opponent, but
So what are you saying?
I am saying that influence is the same thing as causing.
So why didn't you say influence instead of causing? If it's the same
No,
thing?
because the mood
It
says
is not a synonym,
causing.
the opponent.
Yes, the mood says causing. That's what I'm saying, causing, because I am proposing
But you said
the
the same
mood.
thing.
Next
So you are
question.
agreeing with us?
Next, no,
Thank
you
you.
are agreeing with us.
No.
Next, yes.
I'm not saying
Yes.
anything about causing.
Next question.
Influence
Your
means to
first
have an
speaker
effect on.
stated that human activity is accelerating climate change. But aren't the definitions exerting the same idea?
The level of influence is leading to acceleration, yes.
My question is...
That is my answer.
Okay, so you're agreeing with our stance.
Nobody opponent.
Yes,
Let's
that's
move
what
on.
you just said. Opponent, according to the World Health Organization, China is one of the most air-polluted countries in the world due to the high level of carbon being emitted because of its substantial manufacturing industry. Please comment on in light of this stance, in light of your stance.
But if you're honest, we have to understand that carbon dioxide is not the only gas in the ozone layer.
I know that.
Or in the greenhouse in the atmosphere.
I know that.
We have to understand that all these gases were already there. We met it.
But
We have
excess,
to-
which we causes climate change. It's causing
Influences.
climate change.
We
It's
have to
causing
see
climate
the
change.
greenhouse gases as a foundation. We are building upon a foundation, so we cannot say we establish it.
The opposition rebuttal speaker.
Global climate is always changing in accordance with natural causes, and recent changes are not unusual. The National Climate Science Coalition, ICSC. May 2017. Opponents, your first and second speakers stated that human activity has increased CO2 emissions, which lead to climate change. Opponents, CO2 has continually been exchanged between the atmosphere, land, and oceans, and in the carbon cycle. Human contribution to CO2 emission has only distributed nature's balance and is adding CO2 to the atmosphere at a faster rate according to the Australian Academy of Science. This isn't new with the opponents. Human influence has just sped up a natural process. Your first speaker also stated that the Industrial Revolution caused climate change. But opponents, that's false, because climate change happened long before the Industrial Revolution, and human beings are just accelerating the process of climate change. Your first speaker mentioned livestock production as a cause of climate change. Opponents, let's take for example rearing of cows. Are humans really responsible for the fat or deforestation from cows? The only influence here is that they are rearing these cows. Your second speaker talked about scientific tests to prove humans are the cause. But to what extent is this accurate? Your POI speaker stated that China is is heavily polluted with carbon dioxide, but were the opponents. According to the Guardian.com's Environment Data Blog 2009, and I quote, looking at a country's total carbon emission does not tell the story of a country's contribution to global warming, unquote. We built scientific theories to organize and manipulate the world, to reduce phenomena into manageable units. Paul Calanity. Climate change is a reality. It has happened in past, is changing in present, and will change in future, with or without human influence. I thank you.
The proposition rebuttal speaker.
Semantics, distortion, denial of facts. These are some of the tactics used by our opponents here this morning in an effort to misrepresent a well-established fact. However, opponents, the truth will always be the truth, no matter how you twist it. Judges, our opponents have made some erroneous statements, and in the interest of humanity, these cannot be left to stand. The first speaker gave the definition for cause. However, the mood states causing. They also mentioned that climate change is caused by natural factors. However, IPCC states that natural factors evolve over long periods of time, and human activities has brought about rapid changes in the climate. Judges, nowhere in my opponent's speech did they provide any empirical evidence to dispute the fact that human activity isn't causing climate change. Judges, evidence is fundamental in ensuring validity, and so, in the absence of evidence, their argument is flawed. It is invalid. It cannot stand. And I challenge my opponents to provide any form of evidence to refute our arguments. Judges, up to this point, our opponents have not answered the question of if human activity is not causing climate change. Then why is it that we are now required to make changes in human behavior to address same? Opponents, the very fact that these necessitates human responses means that it is indeed being caused by humans. The cross-examination speaker stated that human activity is not the originator and narrows down to global warming. However, we are not on the specific topic of global warming, but it is one of the factors of climate change, which is caused by human activities from the rapid emissions of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The first speaker stated that the climate is changing based on natural causes, and it is being accelerated by human activity. However, we are not here to say human activity is the only cause, but it is causing climate change. They try to play on semantics, but if something...
And the winner is Bishop's College. Thank you for joining us. Please tune in for the final match of Season 11 of the Grenlec Debates, and visit us on Facebook to vote for your favorite debater.
The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas. Vote for your favorite debater on our Facebook page. The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas.